Once, I was blissfully unaware and content because I thought my marriage was strong. However, reality shattered my illusions when I discovered that my wife, Dunya, was unfaithful and deceptive. I'm John Miller, but my friends call me Jay. I'm dedicated to physical training, spending 5 days a week at the gym. Standing at 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing 192 pounds, I prioritize self-care. 8 years ago, I made a bold choice to leave the corporate world and start my own successful company. Meanwhile, Danya continues to work for a well-known company, one of the 50 largest. She has dedicated an impressive 24 years to the same company, starting as an OT analyst a month after our wedding. About 5 years ago, she transitioned to a training unit instructor to keep up with evolving technology. Her job requires attending at least 20 days of educational programs annually. At 46, Donya looks stunning at 5 feet 8 inches tall and 118 pounds. She doesn't fit the expectations for a mother of 2. Each morning, she joins 6 other women from our neighborhood for a challenging 6-mile run at dawn. Now, our 22-year-old daughter, Emily, proudly graduates from Florida State University. Following her mother's path, she became a dedicated first-grade teacher in Naples. Running is a family activity, with Emily joining her mother's running group at 14. I'm delighted she appreciates the beer I brew, my hobby, and even joined a beer club in Naples, which I happily attend with her whenever possible. Our 21-year-old son, Kent, is a recent graduate of the University of Florida, passionate about continuing his education. Although he aspires to work in my business, I've made it clear he must gain 5 years of corporate America experience first. I believe real-world experience is crucial for his growth. Danya, my wife, dislikes beer and finds its aroma unpleasant in our home. I strategically plan my beer brewing during her trips, like her current one to Dallas, giving me the perfect opportunity to craft a refined English brown ale. Life seemed to have peaked, but little did I know significant changes were on the horizon. Last Wednesday at 8:30 p.m., Bobby, a member of my beer club, asked if I could pick him up from the airport. Without hesitation, I agreed. While waiting at the baggage claim, I noticed 3 people who turned out to be colleagues of Danya's. Curiosity led me to wonder why Danya wasn't among them. I called her on the service line, an unusual move as I usually contact her on her personal mobile phone. When I called Danya's office, her answering machine informed me that she would be out of the Dallas office until Wednesday, teaching classes. She mentioned that she wouldn't be home on Thursday and Friday, and instructed to leave a message, with a promise to return calls on Monday. Approaching Bobby, I explained my confusion, and he suggested I talk to Steve, a fellow member of our beer club and a detective in the local police. Deciding to address the situation, I called Donya. During our conversation, I conveyed a desire to hear her voice. In response, she expressed anticipation for the moment when she could hug me. She mentioned that her Friday flight should depart early, and she was looking forward to falling asleep in my loving arms. I asked if she could come, and she replied affirmatively, stating that she had to stay and fulfill her duties. She emphasized that it would be unfair to neglect them and reassured me of her love, mentioning that she would see me on Friday. The revelation that this was the first time Danya had cheated on me was unsettling. Despite the late hour, I contacted Steve for a beer, and we discussed our upcoming meeting. I confided in Steve about my suspicion, and he sympathetically offered his help. I believe Danya is cheating because, meeting Bobby at the airport, I saw 3 of Danya's colleagues leaving with luggage, suggesting they spent the week with her. Despite her voicemail saying she'd be in Dallas until Wednesday and on vacation until Monday, she told me she'd teach classes until Friday. Steve listened patiently and suggested I reach out to Frank Jones, who held a high position and might have more information. I expressed gratitude to Steve and mentioned my plan to contact Frank the following morning. As the sun rose on a new day, Frank Jones unexpectedly appeared, prompted by Steve. After recounting my story, I faced Frank's inquiries. After a brief pause, Frank posed a thought-provoking question. Had I been happily married for over 24 years, and was I truly ready to reveal the truth? Intrigued, I inquired about the reasons behind such a question. Frank cautiously replied that, based on his experience, most marriages in such situations ended in divorce. He presented a series of questions for me to consider. How much information did I really want to obtain? How far into the past should we delve? What was my budget for the investigation? Was I prepared to work with the information we discovered? Shocked, I sat in silence before finally expressing, "Frank, I need to know every last detail. When, where, and with whom, please. As far-reaching as possible. I'm willing to lay out whatever it takes to find out the truth. If I have been deceived, I want to understand to what extent." In response, we decided that Frank should contact his reliable colleague, a private detective from Dallas, who could assist in studying Donia's background. Additionally, one of his team members would review the training schedule. I was instructed to reach out to 3 teachers I saw on the way from the airport. While awaiting their responses, I meticulously checked the house for any clues. Uncertain about what to look for and where to start, I excluded the living room, dining room, kitchen, Emily and Kent's room from the search. Choosing to begin with Donia's dresser, I found nothing unusual among its contents. Although everything seemed familiar, upon opening the closet and observing numerous boxes, I decided to shift my attention to the bathroom. Unfortunately, no hidden information from Donia was found in the bathroom. Returning to her closet, I remained determined to find some clue. Starting with hanging clothes and meticulously going through shoe boxes, I searched for anything strange or suspicious. Despite thoroughly searching our bedroom, the guest bedroom, the study, the garage, and the attic, I still couldn't comprehend anything or gain insight into the situation. Around 5 p.m., Frank finally arrived and swiftly set up surveillance cameras in all bedrooms, the office, and the kitchen. Additionally, he installed a voice recorder. After taking all security measures, we went to the airport, where we eventually located Donia's car. The trunk had a GPS system, and a voice recorder was discreetly placed under the front seat. Frank and I had light ale at the house, and he briefed me. Dawn's class schedule varied in duration, from 3 to 5 days, depending on the location. For instance, classes in Dallas lasted 3 days, starting on Monday and ending on Wednesday. Tom, Paul, and Bev flew out on Sunday afternoon and returned on Wednesday evening. Teaching materials were delivered to the specified location a week before the scheduled class, but teachers weren't responsible for their placement and transportation. Each location had designated employees for those tasks. As I sat there, trying to control my anger, I thought of my father, who always stressed the importance of keeping anger in check for clear thinking. Annoyed, I stormed into the kitchen, expressing my frustration. She had been lying to me all along. There should be consequences for this. Turning to Frank, I asked if he found anything during my search. Unfortunately, I replied that I found nothing suspicious. The only thing we noticed was that Donna frequently washed her clothes. After discussing the issue, we decided that Frank would intercept her bag at the airport, and I would find a way to turn off the washing machine to delay her from starting laundry immediately. Before leaving, Frank mentioned his contact in Dallas being at Donna's hotel and planning to talk to him in the morning before calling me. After Frank left, I realized I couldn't sleep in our bedroom and opted for Kent's bed. Needless to say, I slept very little. Trying to maintain my daily routine, I went to the office. We arranged to meet at my house later that day. Frank arrived at 2 o'clock, carrying a stack of documents. The report from our Dallas employee arrived via email with attached photos. Frank showed me a picture of 6 people gathered at a restaurant table, 3 women and 3 men, sitting in pairs. Curiously, Frank asked if I recognized any of these people. I stared at the photo before responding, "The only one I can identify is Dawn." To get a better look, he handed me individual photos of each person. I studied their faces again in silence, taking a few minutes to scrutinize the details. Handing Frank one of the photos, I mentioned the person seemed strangely familiar, but I couldn't recall where I had seen him before. While having our meal, Frank shared intriguing information. Video cameras were installed on all hotel floors, facing the corridors. We began examining the next set of pictures, showing our group leaving the restaurant, entering the elevator, and eventually disembarking on the 7th floor. Interestingly, the women went to room 707, and the men went to room 709. On Friday morning at 10:29, photos depicted 2 men leaving room 709. Subsequent images captured them exiting the elevator, walking down the hall, and leaving through the front door. These pictures conveyed a sense of a friendly or professional relationship rather than a romantic one. According to Frank, they went to a nearby restaurant for lunch, each covering their own bill. Later, additional photos at the hotel showed them carrying luggage from the room to the elevator, and then each went to the reception desk to complete the checkout process. With a serious expression, Frank turned to me and asked if I was absolutely sure about revealing all the details. Without hesitation, I confidently affirmed my decision. Frank hesitated for a moment, maintaining unwavering eye contact, and then continued. Meanwhile, I received another folder with information about the situation. I won't delve into the conversation details, but I learned that agents from Dallas entered rooms 707 and 709, meticulously recording every step alongside the cleaners. It was revealed that rooms 707 and 709 were connected by an internal door. To gather evidence, sheets were removed and sent to the laboratory for DNA analysis. Additionally, used glasses were carefully packed for fingerprints, and the garbage underwent thorough examination. According to the agent, there was a strong closeness smell in the rooms, and traces of use and stains were found on all 4 beds. To determine if Danya actively participated or just observed, we must await the results of laboratory tests. Frank and I find it hard to believe otherwise, considering her likely involvement in these actions. It's unpleasant to witness the deceptive and unfaithful behavior of the woman I married. As for our next move, she should be back tonight. We decided to start by turning off the washing machine. We moved it and disconnected one of the wires connected to the motor. I believed Frank assigned me this simple task to give me time to process. Back in the kitchen, Frank suggested taking a DNA sample from me and asked if I could find a comb with the hair of each of the children. Perplexed, I asked why he suspected that the children may not be mine and expressed my confusion. "You wanted full transparency, didn't you?" I mused, before suggesting that we needed to collect a piece of hair before the first haircut, needing only 1 strand for each person. He confirmed that this would be enough. Frank carefully packaged my sample as number 1, Kent's as number 2, Emily's as number 3. We managed to take a strand from Donna's comb, numbered as 4. Tomorrow morning, these samples will be sent to the laboratory. Frank has a contact at the airport who will try to intercept Danya's luggage, delaying her return due to the necessary procedures related to the missing baggage claim. After addressing these issues, our conversation shifted to how I could behave normally around Dunya. Could I warmly greet her at home, hug and kiss her? Could I patiently listen to her made-up stories about the trip? Could I invite her to dinner tomorrow and engage in close activities with her? How long and convincingly could I continue to deceive her? Frank mentioned that his team needed ample time to collect and analyze evidence, warning that it could take several months to realize all the consequences of Danya's actions. Could I stay calm for this extended period? I promised him that I was ready to do whatever it took, because my ultimate goal is to uncover the truth. Frank asked if it was possible for me to go on a 3 or 4 day business trip out of town. Thinking about who I could visit in the shortest possible time without arousing suspicion from Danya, I smiled. Looking up, I said I wanted to visit one of my longtime clients in St. Louis. I planned to inform Donna about my departure on Monday morning, with my return scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I asked Frank why he wanted me to leave, seeking an explanation. Frank clarified that if Danya had any hidden motives, she might avoid suspicious actions while I'm away to prevent arousing doubts. There's a chance she could lower her guard, potentially making a foolish move. I sense she had a great weekend and is eager to resume a relationship with someone. Unfortunately, her office lacks video surveillance, but we wondered if there's something she always carries that we can use to our advantage. Perhaps we could discreetly attach a small bug to it. Any suggestions? After pondering, I suggested her briefcase. Frank admitted it's not a perfect solution, but better than nothing. He'll leave a bug with me, and in the evening, I can attach it to her briefcase. It's time for him to go. Am I ready for the show? I replied with a simple yes. As Frank was about to leave, he mentioned that if I had the chance tonight or tomorrow morning, I should check for liquid stains on Danya's underwear. Good night. If you get a chance this weekend, call me. And remember, stay calm. I settled on the back terrace with a porter in hand, letting my thoughts wander. Apart from Donna planning to do laundry early Saturday morning, nothing made me doubt her intentions. Just before dawn, my morning was interrupted by a phone call from Frank. He informed me that Dana's luggage reached the laboratory successfully. He emphasized the need to remain calm. At dawn, her typical travel fatigue mixed with disappointment over the airline mishandling her belongings. She was unhappy, especially missing 2 recently bought pairs of trousers. But she said everything else could be replaced and essentials were safe in her carry-on luggage. Seeking solace, she hugged me, expressing love and joy at returning home. She shared her longing for my presence during her absence. After a gentle hug and kiss, she headed upstairs for a relaxing bath. Meanwhile, I discreetly attached a bug to her briefcase and sat down in front of the TV, thinking about those cherished moments we shared. Recalling Dunya's arrival, I couldn't shake the feeling of immense love from her. Despite travel fatigue and mild luggage dissatisfaction, she was thrilled to be home. Comparing my efforts to her impeccable work, I realized I needed to improve and match her level. It became clear that I needed to improve and hone my abilities so that she would not see that I was behind the facade. I decided to fix the situation, put aside all doubts, and climbed the stairs, preparing for bed where we'd find solace in each other's arms. I think Donya overslept Saturday morning, as she didn't have any worries with the laundry. Before taking a shower, I involuntarily began to examine Donya's underwear and a basket of dirty laundry, feeling uneasy, as if I had invaded her personal life. I didn't expect to closely inspect the close area of her underwear. Though not an expert, I found nothing unusual. After a bath, I went downstairs, made coffee, fetched the newspaper, and waited patiently for dawn. When I was pouring my 3rd cup of coffee, she came into the kitchen with a calm expression on her face, wrapped in a bathrobe and smiling. I greeted her with a cheerful, "Good morning, sleepyhead." Seeing her well-rested, I remarked that it looked like she was ready to conquer the day. I offered a cup of coffee, to which she gratefully smiled and expressed her desire for one. I jokingly mentioned that I should make luggage mistakes more often if it leads to such delightful vacations. After our shared breakfast, I went outside to attend to my own tasks. A few hours later, she mentioned her plan to go to the grocery store and kindly asked if I needed anything. Politely declining, I said, "No thanks." While she was out, I planned to organize and transfer a batch of English brown ale from the primary to the secondary. During dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, we had a lively conversation, sharing our impressions of the past week and discussing upcoming plans. I spoke about my recent trip to St. Louis, and she expressed happiness at being home after exhausting travels. She mentioned if her luggage was still missing by Wednesday, she'd go shopping for replacements after work. To my relief, she hoped no one would find out about it, except for those trousers she's worn for ages. I grinned and continued to share with her the details of my latest batch of English brown ale. In the end, we decided to wrap it up, and I made 2 cases of my homemade beer before heading to St. Louis. I know the journey takes more than 8 hours, but what can I say? I sincerely love to drive, as it allows me to be alone and reflect. Usually, my thoughts revolve around my business, but on this trip, I was thinking only about Don. On the way, I dialed Frank's number and told him about my weekend. Although he had no new information, he said he would keep in touch. Lost in thought, I was surprised to realize that 4 hours had already passed. I dialed Frank's number again, deciding to get down to business. I asked him to tell me honestly what his intuition says. Taking a pause to collect his thoughts, Frank replied that he discussed this issue with Joe in Dallas, and they were sure that Donya had been having numerous affairs for a long time. We proceed from the fact that it is impossible to simply observe many hours of close meetings without active participation. In addition, their undeniable closeness to each other further reinforces our suspicions. They showed no signs of fuss or nervousness, did not hold on to each other, but went into different rooms without attracting attention. People have been developing such confidence in their actions for years. I feel intuitively that you may be unhappy with our conclusions regarding this group, which includes your wife. According to Frank, our man reported that these 6 people discussed classes, their families, and showed amazing ease in communicating with each other. It is noteworthy that they bore their own expenses, deliberately avoided sitting next to the same person during meals, and communicated with each member of the group. It is safe to say that this group has maintained its connection for a long time. They maintained a friendly atmosphere in the hotel rooms, but once inside, they threw stormy parties. Frank's last words to me were about the need to make a decision regarding Donna and the other members of that group. After that, I contacted my lawyer, Michael Davidson, the best divorce lawyer in the state. After giving him a brief information, he convinced me that Dave Ford would definitely contact me. After settling into a hotel room, I called Tanya to inform her of my safe arrival in St. Louis. Then I contacted Fred to confirm our planned golf game. At about 9:30 p.m., Frank called to see how I was doing. I told him that I had already given his name to my lawyer and that Mike would contact Dave Ford on my behalf. Frank found it funny and mentioned that Dave Ford's reputation alone could intimidate any lawyer Tanya approached. I'm tired, and I really want this situation to end. If they want to play violent games, then I am ready to show my skills. On Tuesday, I spent the whole day with Fred on the golf course. Around 1 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, Frank called me and asked about my schedule. I told him that I was free until the end of the day and planned to go home on Thursday morning at about 2 p.m. Dave Ford contacted me, and I informed him about the current situation. I felt relieved when he gave his approval of my success. He highly praised Frank's company, considering it among the best. After learning my plans, Dave inquired about my desires. If Dawn proves unfaithful, I'll seek a divorce. However, to fully grasp my disappointment in Dawn and her partners, I must wait for Frank's team's investigation to conclude. I suggest starting the divorce process, citing infidelity as the basis. Our conversation shifted to gathering evidence during the upcoming class and discussing my ability to maintain the appearance of a normal life for several months. Dave informed me about the possibility of a quick, no-fault divorce in Georgia. Accusing her of infidelity would be more profitable, especially with our children being adults. After further discussion, I realized I needed to carefully consider my approach to divorce. On Wednesday evening at 9 o'clock, there was a sudden knock on my door. To my surprise, Steve and Frank were standing there. I asked about their unexpected visit, and Frank replied with unpleasant news he wanted to share personally. Steve didn't know the purpose, but Frank thought it would be good for me to have a friend at this conversation. It's up to you whether Steve stays to hear the news. Despite the seriousness, I wanted Steve to stay. Seated, I met Frank's eyes. He revealed that test results confirmed Donna's active participation. Shockingly, traces of all 6 individuals' activities were found on one bed, even though each woman had her own bed. Our evidence strongly proves that every woman had close relations with all 3 men on their beds. Identifying Danya was possible with the DNA sample taken from our house's hair. Jay, I'm sorry for how things turned out. I was stunned, trying to grasp the depth of the situation. Time seemed to have stopped, and I sat in silence, closing my eyes to regain calm and suppress the growing rage. Finally, I plucked up the courage and opened my eyes to utter words of disbelief. Doubting anything could be more terrible than finding out my wife was involved with 5 other people. Frank, with a slight cough, revealed the unthinkable truth. 2 of these men turned out to be the biological fathers of our children, Kent and Emily. I wasn't there. Father. This news hit me like a ton of bricks, and in an instant, I jumped up, shouting for an explanation. How can this be? My children weren't mine. I will have a certain benefit from this opportunity, as I will be the one to use it. This woman has been in an extramarital relationship for more than 24 years, deceiving and manipulating me. They sat in silence, watching me walk up and down the room in agitation. My thoughts were racing, trying to figure out the news I had just learned. My once perfect world was crumbling before my eyes. How do I navigate this situation now? It was impossible to imagine that neither Kent nor Emily were my biological children, not to mention that my wife had a long-term love affair with one of the partners throughout our marriage. Frank accurately assessed the current difficult situation. It was clear that the consequences of this would be severe. I planned to show my ability to play hard. Steve and Frank watched as my emotions gradually changed from shock, disbelief, and confusion to sadness, loneliness, loss, anger, rage, and finally, determination. Time seemed to freeze. I walked back and forth, not realizing how much time had passed. It became clear that Frank and Steve came to me in St. Louis not only to provide support, but also to prevent impulsive acts. When I regained my composure and pulled myself together, their purpose became clear. During the conversation, we discussed my position and plans. I made it clear that she must answer for her actions. Despite the lack of sleep, Their presence provided much-needed support, as I doubted I could drive a car without them. Having received the necessary evidence, we carefully selected the most effective measures to influence them. A divorce from Donya would have been a loud and humiliating affair for her, although I admit I would have to experience embarrassment as well. Over time, the truth that Emily and Kent had different fathers would become widely known, exposing my wife's unfaithful nature. In the state of Georgia, both parties have the option to file for a no-fault divorce, which means filing, waiting for 30 days, getting a divorce, and dividing the property. In the case of filing for divorce based on infidelity, the process becomes much longer, taking months to set the court session date and provide evidence. Despite my strong desire to bring Dawn to court for her infidelity and force her through all the court proceedings, my friends Steve, Frank, and Dave convinced me of the need for a no-fault divorce. They said it would be faster and more economical, and at the same time, I would be able to embarrass Dawn and her partners. Now all I had to do was decide when to proceed with the divorce. In Atlanta, Steve, Frank, Dave, and I gathered in Frank's conference room to discuss what we know, what information we still need to get, what methods to get it, and what actions need to be taken to bring them to justice. Curiously, I asked Frank if Dawn had been involved in any suspicious activities while I was away in St. Louis. Frank replied that Dawn had done nothing wrong and had not conducted any inappropriate phone conversations. Continuing the conversation, Frank said that we were able to trace all the actions of a group of 6 people over the past 5 years. Interestingly, 2 members of the group constantly booked adjacent rooms, although they were not always the same people. Although most often, all 6 people were present in the room. There were cases when the composition of the group changed. At times, 1 woman appeared next to 3 men, forming a group of at least 4 people. I did not expect such a development of events, and therefore I began to show my despair by damaging the table with force and sharply calling it cheating. I demanded that Frank thoroughly investigate the gang of 6 people, including Dawn, and find out all the details. It became clear that my knowledge of the situation is limited. I wanted to discover their marital status, the duration of their parental relationships, and whether the children of these women were fathered by their husbands. Additionally, I needed information on whether they all worked in the same organization, their places of residence, and other details that could be uncovered. With Donya's schedule in hand, Frank obtained information about upcoming classes and their locations. This allowed Frank to establish contact and develop a detailed plan, including installing cameras and bugs in hotel rooms. Frank understood that evidence collected this way couldn't be used in court, but his goal was to achieve a guilt-free divorce, requiring crucial information. An interesting detail in Dana's calendar was that she had exactly 3 classes scheduled before our upcoming 25th wedding anniversary celebration. Notably, the 25th anniversary fell on a Sunday, and Donya's last class in Orlando ended on Friday. Observing this group, I firmly decided that our anniversary would mark the end of our communication. I chose not to participate in any celebrations with her, as her gift would not be appreciated. At that moment, I would cease being a deceived spouse, and she would begin facing the consequences of her deceitful actions that persisted for over 24 years. In that moment, I would turn my suffering into her worst nightmare. Donya would deeply regret the day our paths crossed because I considered her guilty of numerous lies endured throughout our marriage. A week passed, and we gathered in Dave's conference room, eagerly awaiting news from Frank. As I settled in, I couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey we all experienced together. The group, known as the Gang of 6, included George C. Thomas from Richmond, Virginia, Henry S. King from Little Rock, Arkansas, Charles K. Nixon from Columbia, South Carolina, Joyce D. Hopkins from Miami, Florida, Catherine G. Williams from Knoxville, Tennessee, and of course, Dawn. Fate brought them together over 24 years ago during a training program for new employees of the same organization. When the Wednesday of Donya's last class arrived, Frank, Steve, Dave, and I gathered around the conference table, ready to hear the latest news. Last week in Washington, Donya and Henry occupied adjoining rooms, while the other 4 members of the group were scattered on different floors of the hotel. It was discovered that Donna and Henry, in adjacent rooms, slept in the same room at the same time. No woman entered or left the man's room, and there was never a simultaneous exit from adjacent rooms during the whole day and early evening. They spent a lot of time together, but after 10 o'clock in the evening, they gradually dispersed to their rooms. Only after 2 o'clock in the morning did they return to their rooms, except for Thursday evening, when all six spent the whole night in adjacent rooms. Their conversations and interactions outside the rooms resembled those of professional colleagues. They discussed accommodation, meals, attended games and performances, and shared news about their children's classes. After 24 years of living together, keeping their secrets hidden has become a familiar thing. Once again, Frank's agents discreetly entered the room, posing as a cleaning crew. Fortunately, close contacts occurred only in adjacent rooms, making it easier to collect hair samples and fingerprints from each participant for further analysis. Sheets from each room were carefully collected, along with samples of women's underwear. Thanks to irrefutable DNA evidence, we successfully uncovered the truth. George turned out to be Emily's father, and Chuck was Kent's biological father. Danya faced difficulties associated with unprotected closeness, having many partners, making it impossible to determine the true father of her children. In Richmond, Virginia, George C. Thomas had been married for 24 years with 2 adult children. George and his wife were unaware that they would soon find out about another daughter. Similarly, Henry S. King from Little Rock, Arkansas, had been married for 23 years with twin sons who turned 21. On the other hand, Charles K. Nixon from Columbia, South Carolina, tied the knot with his high school sweetheart and lived in marriage for 25 years, resulting in a son. Chuck is on the verge of revealing the truth that he has another son. In Miami, Florida, Joyce D. Hopkins, happily married, is getting ready to celebrate her 25th wedding anniversary. Joyce is a proud mother of a 23-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter. Meanwhile, Catherine G. Williams from Knoxville, Tennessee, has been married for 23 years and is the mother of 2 daughters and a son. All members of the friendly group called the Gang of Six have been married for over 23 years and seem content, except for Chuck, who recently discovered the painful reality of his wife's infidelity. We're curious about whether any of these 3 men could be the fathers of Joyce or Catherine's children. It's very likely that at least one of them is the biological father, and their spouses probably want to know the answer too. Frank hopes to find out by next Wednesday, although I'm not sure about his plans. In a brief meeting at Dave's office on Wednesday, Frank informed us that classes in Orlando last only 3 days, which is quite surprising. Can you believe it? Next Thursday and Friday, the group plans to spend time before its anniversary. Bish's complete lack of respect for me is indisputable. Bish will be responsible for the consequences. When I came to my senses a little, Frank reminded me that I am not the only spouse whose children have different biological fathers. Henry is the father of both Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son. Catherine has 2 daughters whose fathers are George and Chuck. Surprisingly, Joyce is the only woman among all who has at least one child whose father is her husband. Henry is the biological father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son, and George is Emily's father. One of Catherine's daughters is also the child of Chuck, who is her biological father. It's all pretty confusing, and I feel like I need a flowchart to keep track of it all. Even though I know my marriage is over and I've gone through all the stages of grief, I find the strength to create the appearance of a loving husband. It's become a kind of game for me. I pretend to be affectionate while secretly planning how to ruin my future ex-wife Doña Melon, who cheated on me. It's pretty funny, considering she's been cheating on me for over 24 years. If she can lie to my face for so long, then I will definitely be able to pretend to be a devoted, caring, albeit forgetful husband. For several months, Frank's team planned to carry out the same procedures in San Diego as in Washington. They were going to scrupulously examine the collected records and evidence, hoping to find all the missing details with unshakable confidence. They expected that everything would happen the same way as in Washington. Personally, I couldn't contain my excitement about the upcoming trip to Orlando and was happy to think about how to turn their life into an absolute nightmare. Unfortunately, Catherine couldn't join us in San Diego, but since classes in Orlando lasted 3 days, all 6 of us agreed that we would attend them. The prospect of spending 2 days without the presence of colleagues, where we could maneuver freely, filled us with joyful anticipation. Donya was clearly neglecting our anniversary when she chose to spend time with her comrades instead of rushing to the one she supposedly loves. She didn't know yet that I had already planned to be their instructor for Wednesday afternoon. In the presence of all the students, I will hold the final hour of classes so that everyone will witness the final exit of the Gang of Six. Dave Ford and his team were well informed and prepared to process the necessary legal documents. He gave me a guarantee that everything necessary would be ready on time. In addition, Frank ordered his staff to be present on the spot and closely monitor the members of the group. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Dave, Frank, Steve, and I have jointly developed a strategy to eliminate their vulnerability after the foundation was laid. My moment finally came when I had to go on stage after Dana's departure. In the fourth update, I took the initiative to establish contacts with the spouses of our close-knit group of 6 people. I shared with them my plan to surprise my wife in Orlando in honor of our 25th wedding anniversary and 25 years of experience in the company. Considering that their spouses came to the company at the same time as mine, I decided that their presence would be pleasant for everyone. As a token of appreciation, I have booked flights that will be waiting for them at the boarding gate. I informed Kent and Emily of the plan to surprise their mother on Wednesday and invited them to meet me in Orlando on Tuesday. In the evening of the same day, I got together with the children and told them all the details. We spent several hours discussing how I found out the truth, the evidence I gathered, my intentions to destroy their mother's world the next day, and most importantly, how much I cherish them. During our heartfelt conversation, I told them that I might not be their biological father, but assured them that I would always be a loving father to them. We hugged tightly, and tears flowed down our faces. They had a lot of questions, and I tried to answer them honestly, without embellishing my answers. I begged them not to tell my mother, and they both promised not to. Looking into their eyes, I said that I would like them to accompany me tomorrow when I would confront their mother and shame her. I acknowledged that this was a very important request and apologized if it confused them. Unfortunately, the fact that they are not my biological children will soon be made public in the Atlanta newspapers, which will undoubtedly lead to shame for all of us. If they decide to come, they will witness my rude attitude towards their mother and her companions. I may say something that will embarrass them, but it is important to know that nothing I say will change my attitude towards them. Since you're already adults, I cannot legally adopt you, although I would gladly do it if I could. But despite this, I want you to know that I sincerely love you both and consider you my children. It is up to you to decide whether you will attend, because in the end, she is your mother. Take your time, think about everything, and make a decision yourself, knowing that I will love you from now on and forever? Kent asked with tears in his eyes. Dad, I understand that Mom loves you and you love her. Can you find the strength in your heart to forgive her and move on? Why don't you both go to a psychologist to sort this out? Looking at my children, I tried to stay calm and keep myself in hand. How can you calmly and rationally answer such incredulous questions? Taking a deep breath, I realized that as children, they naturally want their parents to always be together and constantly be present next to them. So please close your eyes and let me take you on a journey. Imagine that you have met an extraordinary person whom you consider an ideal couple with whom you want to spend the rest of your life. The very thought of being separated from him, even for a moment, becomes unbearable. After a magical honeymoon, you both start building your careers, and over the years, you have 2 wonderful children. Your life revolves around the happiness and well-being of your family. Whether it's football training or cheerleading camps, you dedicate your time to supporting your loved ones in their pursuits. This extends from adolescence into adulthood. Sharing romantic getaways and close dinners with your spouse, you cherish every moment spent together. Holding your loved ones close, you recognize them as the most precious treasure in your life. Your love for them drives you to make the most of every minute, even when unexpected opportunities lead you to leave the city for a while. No matter where you go, your heart longs to return to the warm embrace of family. Grateful for their presence, you express your thanks to God daily, understanding that your family brings immense joy and happiness into your life. In this state of contentment and bliss, you find solace in believing that life cannot get any better. Take a moment to ponder these words as they sink into your consciousness. Happiness radiates from the faces of the people before me. Kent, picture yourself watching a movie with your beloved wife. In a scene, she finds herself in a hotel room with 3 men and 2 women. Each woman selects a card from the deck, and your wife's face lights up with joy when she reveals her ace of spades. Given this scenario, Kent, do you still believe in your wife's love for you? Emily, envision your husband as one of the men in this movie. How do you feel about forgiveness? Are you willing to seek help from a psychologist and overcome this issue together? Kent sat there, his eyes filled with tears, and Emily sobbed beside him. Both needed time to process my words and regain control of their overwhelming emotions. As the film concluded and the credits rolled, it became evident that the group had consistently released 4 films a year for 24 years. Surprisingly, we even gained access to a live broadcast of them shooting another movie in a hotel room just a kilometer away from us. Additionally, I managed to collect over 40 hours of video recordings from your mother and her colleagues during the 3 previous expeditions. Wouldn't it be devastating to discover that you're not the biological parent of your children, or worse, that your husband is the biological father of someone else's child? How would you feel upon learning such revelations? Continuing my thoughts, I presented a scenario where the person dearest to you decides to leave you and your children a day early to engage in entertainment with a group of people solely for an extra day of fornication activities. Furthermore, they decide to extend their stay for an additional 2 days solely to continue their close life. When your spouse returns home, it takes a whole day for them to recover before being with you, the person they claim to love. How much love, respect, and care do you think they feel for their spouses or children? Your mother not only disrespected and lied to me, but to both of you. Kent, holding back tears, responded that he had never thought about it from that point of view and acknowledged that his father was right. He expressed that he wouldn't want his wife to treat him in a similar manner and hadn't anticipated that his mom would prefer spending more time with this group instead of being at home. Kent expressed his love, stated uncertainty about being around tomorrow, and apologized for the pain his father was going through. He promised to keep his father posted and mentioned that if his husband ever did such a thing, she would give him a good kick. Emily expressed her gratitude for being such a wonderful father and stated her love for him. She acknowledged that Kent seemed to put his interests ahead of theirs, similar to how their mom chose her group. Emily also mentioned that she and her father would be there tomorrow, and that it was time for Kent to step up and become a responsible adult. Taken aback by Emily's unexpected reaction and outburst, I admired my kids with a burning look. Emily inquired about the plan of action for tomorrow. I explained that I had invited the spouses of the members of this company, consisting of 6 people, to join us tomorrow for a surprise celebration. Their spouses believed that we were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, and since they had been with Danya all these years, I decided it would be appropriate for them to take part in the celebration. You and Kent are the only ones who know about this in advance. I want it to be a complete surprise for everyone else. I plan to provide them with all the evidence I have so that they can freely express their emotions and calmly react to their unfaithful partners. By the way, don't forget that you have stepbrothers and sisters that you might want to meet later. All 5 remaining partners joined us at the hotel. We had the opportunity to meet, get acquainted, and enjoy a delicious lunch at 2 p.m. Our group, including Kent, went to the hotel where Donna's class was taking place. When we entered the lobby of the hotel, the rest of my unexpected guests were already waiting for us. Among them were a lawyer from Dave Ford's office, Frank's employee, and an experienced videographer. To top it off, a florist arrived at 2:30 p.m. to deliver 25 red roses ordered by me personally. Emily and other women couldn't help but admire their beauty and noted how beautiful they looked. Emily's eyes were blazing with determination. She was preparing for the upcoming battle. Taking a break to calm down, I told her that everything was in my hands. At exactly 2:45 p.m., we went to the meeting room, Emily leading the way and Kent following. The couple, overcome with anticipation, looked no less excited. Carrying a bouquet of 25 roses, I entered Donna's classroom at 3 p.m., accompanied by John Manning and his video camera. Donna's face turned crimson when she noticed me approaching with flowers and a smile on my face. I playfully noticed that her blush was perfectly combined with roses, which caused a burst of laughter from everyone present. Smiling, Donna looked at me and then turned to face the class, introducing me as JT, her beloved husband. Scanning the room, I noticed the other 5 people scattered around, just as I expected. Turning back to Dunya, I conveyed that I knew today was the last day of classes, and before they all left, I would appreciate their help to make this day unforgettable for her. I shared that this Sunday, we would be celebrating our amazing 25th wedding anniversary. Right on cue, a group led by Emily emerged from the hallway. As they entered, the photographer captured a stunning picture of Donna's face. Although her expression was absolutely priceless, the close group members appeared to be in complete panic. Grinning broadly, I stood and observed as Emily introduced Dawn to the spouses of her friends involved in ducks. It was clear that Emily was relishing the unfolding drama, and I realized her future husband should be cautious. I explained that we were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this Sunday and hoped to get their help to make it special. I mentioned that next month, Donna would be marking the 25th anniversary of her work in this company, making it truly wonderful when 2 significant events happened in such a short time. I found it interesting. Around the same time, George, Henry, Chuck Jones, and Catherine joined the company. To make this event more memorable, I invited their spouses to join us. I informed them that John would be recording this special event on video, so they should take a moment and say a few words to the camera before leaving. After a pause and a deep breath, my pulse began to slow down, allowing me to truly appreciate the familiar faces of this incredible group of 6 people. I invited George, Henry, Chuck, Joyce, and Catherine to step forward and join us. The group moved to the front of the room, receiving applause from other participants. When Emily appeared next to me, I sensed she was eagerly anticipating what was coming. Taking her hand in mine, I guided her to George. In a calm voice, I introduced George Thomas as Emily's biological father. Donna's face turned pale. She looked like a ghost. George's wife stared at me with disbelief and asked me to repeat my words. I confirmed that, indeed, George is Emily's biological father. George found his voice and questioned why I thought he was her father. I extended my hand, and the lawyer placed 3 documents in my palm. Turning to George, I handed him the first document, saying it was a petition for a court-ordered paternity test. Handing him the second document, I continued, stating that I was suing him, demanding 21 years of unpaid alimony and compensation for emotional suffering caused. Finally, I handed George a copy of the lawsuit against his employer, explaining it was a lawsuit for non-compliance with the moral obligations in his employment contract. I assured George's wife that I had copies of all the evidence she could use at her discretion. The atmosphere in the room became chaotic, as other spouses realized this wasn't a joyful celebration. Amidst the chaos, I found comfort in my own amusement. Unexpectedly, Kent approached me, stood tall, and silently nodded in appreciation. At that moment, pride overwhelmed me as I looked at Kent. With a sense of achievement, I guided us to Chuck, intending to introduce him similarly to how I introduced Emily to her biological father. I said to Kent, trying to sound confident, that I wanted him to meet his biological father, Charles Nixon. A eerie silence filled the room when Chuck's middle name was pronounced. As the name lingered, the lawyer calmly handed me the documents. Thoroughly, I went through each page with Chuck, repeating the process I had done with George. Chuck's wife, concerned that she had copies, confirmed I had them. When the realization hit that Dawn had only 2 children, a sense of calm settled over everyone in the room. Smiling, I anticipated that I wouldn't let the others get away unscathed. They enjoyed their games, and now it's time for them to face the consequences. Dunya sat on a chair, tears streaming down her face. I announced, realizing my appearance had caught them by surprise, that they should get ready because the real fun was about to begin. A silence enveloped the room, as if a pin could be heard falling. Taking a deep breath, I continued, revealing a secret that had been buried for 5 long months. Doe, Jones, Catherine, George, Chuck, and Henry attended classes together for the sole purpose of avoiding their duties. This charade has been going on for over 2 decades. Discussing this revelation, I couldn't help but mention Emily, who recently turned 23. The truth was finally out, and the consequences were about to unfold. Let's break it down. Henry is the biological father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son, the eldest daughter of Emily. Catherine is George's biological child, Kent's biological father, and Chuck's daughter. Surprisingly, Joyce's son is actually her husband's child. Can you believe it? Of the 7 children these 3 women have, only 1 is the child of their spouse. The room was in complete chaos. I won't delve into the rest of the events in detail. Picture a scenario where all the necessary legal documents have been successfully delivered. Copies of these documents were given to the spouses, leading to a massive upheaval within the group of 6 people. Handing Dawn the divorce papers, I firmly stated that she should not contact me, return home, or attempt to see me again. I couldn't help but express my deep disappointment with her deceitful and wrong actions. Sitting in my hotel room, I spent some time pondering the events related to Donna and her friends. But my thoughts were interrupted by Emily, who suddenly appeared next to me. Initially, I planned to confront Dana, gradually addressing each member of her group and eventually revealing the truth about the children. Emily had a strong desire to meet face-to-face with her biological father. As for me, I decided to abandon my original plan and go with the flow. My main goal was to inform the group of 6 people that I had discovered their infidelity and exposed them to their spouses. I wanted to publicly shame them in front of my colleagues and take legal action against them by handing them the claim documents. As a result, their spouses were left furious, bringing me a sense of satisfaction and self-confidence. Suddenly, a knock interrupted my thoughts, prompting me to open the door. To my surprise, my children were standing there, the same ones who had previously helped their mother into her room. After greeting them, I asked what brought them to my doorstep. Emily hugged me tightly, showing her love for me. She began, acknowledging my reluctance to discuss her mother, and mentioned that she understood that I didn't want to hear about her mom. However, she explained that Danya was in a fragile state, and she had decided to take her home the next day and give her a whole week to pack her things before returning to Atlanta. Despite everything Danya had done to our family, Emily expressed that she couldn't help but love her. There was determination in Emily's eyes, and I realized that Danya was in desperate need of someone's support. I was grateful to Emily for doing what was right for her mother. The last few days had shown me that Emily is an incredibly resilient and strong woman. Kent, expressing himself, said that he loved me and despised the way Mom ruined our family. He asked if he could accompany me on my trip home tomorrow. Without hesitation, I happily agreed, saying that I would be glad if he came home with me tomorrow. Emily got up from her seat, hugged me, and said she was going to stay the night with her mom because she didn't think Danya should be left alone. As she walked out the door, her last words were, "Daddy, I love you." Kent and I spent a few hours together, drank several bottles of beer, after which he went to his room. 5 years have passed since I dismantled a gang of 6 people that once flourished, and I am glad to report that these years have been prosperous for me. The satisfaction I feel regarding the consequences inflicted on this group is immeasurable. Over the next week, all 6 people were dismissed from their posts. Now they are divorced, have no means of livelihood, broken, and completely alone. Strangely enough, their past keeps coming up and tormenting them whenever they manage to find a decent job, which eventually forces them to look for an alternative job. I would like to take responsibility for their misfortunes, but another structure is closely monitoring their actions. They are trying to rebuild their lives and establish relationships with their children. But I am very pleased to report that their path is far from over. Their ex-partners only reach out when they need money. Some of them are slowly rebuilding connections with their kids. When I returned to Atlanta and spent a night in our house, I realized I couldn't stay there again. It held too many memories that were too painful. In my search for a new home, I temporarily stayed in a hotel. Kent joined me on the trip to Atlanta, but later moved to Dallas, Texas, where he landed his first real job. He seems happy with his work and has been promoted 4 times. Currently single, he actively dates and enjoys his job, contemplating joining my company this summer. Even though 5 years have passed, the relationship with their mother remains strained. They occasionally talk on the phone. Kent hadn't seen his mother for a long time since we left Orlando. On the other hand, Kent and Emily converse almost daily. The consequences of exposing the gang of 6 have profoundly affected us, especially the children. I'm uncertain if Kent will ever trust someone enough for marriage, but Emily took Donna with her to Naples for a week. Emily constantly thwarted Donna's attempts to explain, insisting she leave it for her therapist, as she wasn't interested in what she considered lies. Emily firmly believes she can't find an adequate explanation for Donna's actions and the subsequent destruction of their family. Furthermore, Donna didn't receive an invitation to Emily's private wedding, celebrating their first anniversary. Presently, Emily and her husband Trey live in Atlanta, choosing not to work in my company, although Emily joined 2 years ago. Despite this, I value her nearby presence, discovering she has a natural talent for business. Emily made it clear to Trey from the start about the consequences if she found out about his infidelity, knowing well what Donna had done. After exposing the gang of 6, their spouses and children gathered in Atlanta 8 months later. Being around people who experienced similar emotions and tried to move forward helped us navigate life. The children have formed strong bonds and continue to communicate. In 3 weeks, we're heading to Nashville for another meeting. It turns out, when the gang of 6 began cheating, instead of engaging closeness, they paired up for a week. Emily and Kent were named after George's mother and his father, respectively, forever connecting them to their biological father. Even after 5 years, their relationship with Donna remained strained. Emily at least agrees to have lunch, but Kent categorically refuses to meet her once. I was deeply in love with Donna until I discovered her deceit and infidelity. I understand it's tough for some men to move forward, but I'm not one of them. Life goes on. We have 2 options: give up or get up and move on. My children depended on me, and I depended on them. Dana and I agreed she'd keep the house, as she believed it held too many cherished memories to part with. I, on the other hand, had different views. I also settled matters with George and Chuck, placing the money they provided in trust funds for Emily and Kent. My intention wasn't to profit, but to make them feel the consequences of their actions. 6 months after finalizing our divorce, I decided to start dating again. My main goal was to find someone special to share my love and life with. The key to a full and joyful life is both loving someone and being loved in return. Until that happens, I'll patiently search and wait for Emily to give me grandchildren to shower with affection. It's crucial to note that committing such deceptive actions as betrayal doesn't lead to positive outcomes. In the end, retribution only perpetuates a destructive cycle. Additionally, Donna faced humiliation publicly, and karma punished her. Her relationships with men faltered, and she struggled to find decent employment. Currently, she works as a cook in a fast food restaurant, and a terrible incident occurred at work. Hot oil from the deep fryer spilled over her body from the waist down. Her skin suffered 95% damage. It's like Donna has been scalded alive. I can't fathom the pain. Now she's in the clinic under close medical supervision.